Growing a B2B company is one thing, but growing it the right way is a whole other story. So today we're breaking down real strategies to help you work smarter by streamlining operations, tracking the right metrics, aligning your teams, and staying ahead of industry changes. We're joined today by two fantastic speakers, Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger, who'll talk to us, who'll walk us through the smart growth framework and how businesses can scale efficiently. And we also have Michael Schmidt, the administrator of palliative care at Emory Healthcare, who's going to share real-world insights on adapting to industry challenges, building trust in sensitive industries, and measuring for success. Our event today will run for about 55 minutes, and we'll have a panel discussion at the end. And that's about it. So let's roll over to Eric to kick things off.
Thank you, Shafika, and thanks, Michael, for joining us. We're going to have Michael sort of add in some flavor as we go through the initial part of this presentation. So I'm going to get the screen up and running. So today we're going to be talking about the SMART marketing framework, and this is a way for your organization to drive growth through effective strategies. And in order to kind of kick this off and talk about it, I'm going to use one of my favorite quotes. So I consider this a new way of thinking. Albert Einstein is famous for saying, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them." So when you are considering the problems that you're trying to work through in marketing, specifically have an organization that's scaling, you have to think about it a little differently. And one of the things that we run into at Liger all the time, which is a way of thinking that comes from the old school world of marketing, is this focus on one very specific part of the customer journey. So the way we look at the customer journey and addressing that kind of marketing journey for your customer is there's several steps that they have to take. And the way that we talk about this is that there is branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and then finally measurement. And the old school world of thinking is thinking about conversion. Everyone wants conversion. If I could get up every morning, make one phone call and get somebody to buy from me, that would be amazing. That's really all I want to do. But when we are really considering someone who's making some kind of choice, specifically a really important choice, like working with Michael's organization in palliative care, I need a little bit more before I'm ready to make that decision. So the reality is we have to address traffic. So are we pulling people into our organization, our store, our website in a good and meaningful way to then convert them? Are they aware that we exist? And is our brand done well? And then once we have those things in place, we can start to optimize and measure and see what's working and what's not. So often when you're inside these complex organizations, maybe organizations that are newly formed or really focused on, bringing new people through the door, you'll hear the CEO and the finance person just looking for that conversion. As a marketer, you need to talk to them about how you can back them up and think about the things that need to happen in order to get to that conversion and get to that conversion smoothly. So some of what we're going to discuss today falls into that category. And so taking this back-com approach, how do we start to address the areas that really cause problems for organizations when they're trying to get to that holy grail of conversion? Some of the challenges when you focus only on conversion are there's operational efficiencies within your organization. So your organization is just not smoothly set up to move a customer from initial discovery of your brand to the point of conversion. Your teams are misaligned, your strategies are misaligned. There may be eroded trust due to an inconsistent customer experience. I'm sure we've all had that, you see an ad, you click on it, and then you're expecting a phone call and the person never gets back to you. Or you have that first phone call with someone and then they don't follow up with another phone call. Or you walk into a store and you have an expectation from an ad or something that you've seen and it doesn't fit your need. And then finally, another important one is a lack of agility. Just because something's working today doesn't mean that it's going to work tomorrow. So when you're scaling your company, these are some of the big categories and targets that you have to consider in order to make sure that you're really going to grow effectively. And so at Liger, what we've done is we've built this smart marketing framework. So we want our marketing to be smart. And the goal is to simplify your marketing strategy to address the unique marketing challenges faced by a complex enterprise. I like to tell people at Liger, we don't sell t-shirts or soda. There's nothing wrong with selling t-shirts or soda. We sell complex product or complex services, things that require a lot of decision making and may have some risk in the choice. So, for example, if I'm choosing a palliative care location or center that I want to work with, that's something that on the way I'm going to make sure that I've made all the right decisions, that I've thought about everything in a very good way. If I'm a company picking a software product to install, that software product has to work for all of the needs, and I don't want to look like an idiot in front of my boss because I picked the wrong one. So we want to simplify that marketing strategy and address those unique marketing challenges that your complex enterprise may be facing. And so SMART breaks down into kind of five big categories. The first is to simplify. So how do we streamline with clear messaging and automation? What do we measure? What metrics are we tracking, and how do we know what those are and define them? We want to align, ensure our company departments are working together, respond, adapt quickly to the industry changes, and target, use segmentation for personalized campaigns. So these are five areas when we're thinking about a marketing strategy that we want to make sure we're addressing. Is it simple? Can we measure it? Is it aligned across the organization? Can we respond if things change or as things change along that marketing spectrum? Things always change. There's always something new to consider. This is not a set it and forget it kind of world. And who are we targeting? So who are we going after? Who do we really want to bring to that point of conversion? So I'm going to go through today and talk about a few of these, and Michael's going to step in on a few of them and tell us how they kind of impact his world. A few of them we're going to hold. We've got this as a multi-webinar series. So some I'm just going to touch on today, and then we'll cover them in a future webinar. And some I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper into as we have the conversation. So let's get started and talk a little bit about Simplify. So Simplify, in a world of information overload, businesses must simplify their marketing to cut through the noise and effectively engage customers. Marketing is incredibly complex just because there's so many messages coming at people all day long. Even as you're watching this webinar, you may be watching it later on a YouTube video. There's ads running. There's things that interrupt. Like we're always getting messages, things that we have to filter through as human beings. And what's interesting about that is that's impacted our attention span. So the attention span of a goldfish is 8 seconds, and a human is 7. So we have less of an attention span than a goldfish. And so you're fighting against those messages as a marketer, making sure that you're really driving awareness, getting in front of somebody, doing something unique. And in order for that to be effective, you must simplify your marketing. And simplification comes into two categories, two things that you can kind of think about. First is making sure you have a clear and consistent message. So you want to avoid jargon and focus on value-driven communication. And so I came up with an example here of one that is not that, and something that we see often, specifically in complex enterprises, when they're trying to sell the latest, greatest technology. So this is an example of a non-simple message. So at XYZ Solutions, we leverage cutting-edge AI-powered synergies to deliver scalable and cloud-native solutions, deliver robust, scalable cloud-native solutions, and optimize mission-critical workflows. So you get the idea. It's full of jargon, lots of words, lots of things that are kind of buzzy today. And when you get to the end of it, driving unparalleled efficiencies and hyper-personalized experiences, you have no idea what this company does. And you don't care. You've heard so many big words. There's so many things that you need to, process through that your brain about part of the way through, you've gotten into that 7 seconds and it's just moved on. So we want to make sure that these messages are simple. Taking that same definition and looking at this company again, Rely on XYZ solutions to streamline your business operations by automating routine tasks and integrating with your existing tools. The result, improved customer interactions that grow your business. So this is a much simpler way of talking about this company. If it were a real company, I'd spend even more time trying to get it down to as few words as possible. I tell my team that for every word you use, pretend like it cost $100. So you want to get rid of any words you don't have to have, and you do want to make sure it's focused towards your customer. The prior example, there was a lot of we and our in that. So we do this, our is that. If you look at the simplified version, we're turning the perspective over to the customer. So we're talking to the customer about their problem, what they need. We're putting this in their shoes. This is a way for them to relate more directly to it and understand what your business does and how it might help them out. So getting rid of that jargon, we all love it. Companies love to, like when AI first came out, I went to a trade show and everybody had tagged AI at the end of their name. Like now empowered by AI, now empowered by AI. I mean, what did that mean? It just was a buzzword that everybody felt like they needed to get on top of. But the cleaner and more simple you can be, the better. The other thing you want to do is develop a simple and compelling brand story. So why do you exist? What is it that makes you different in this world? Why did you build this company? Why do your people show up at work every day? A good example of this is Warby Parker. So Warby Parker wanted to address the problem that buying glasses are expensive and inconvenient. Traditional retailers mark up prices, and customers had to visit stores without knowing if they'll find the right style. And so what Warby Parker did was they founded on a simple idea. Glasses should be stylish, affordable, and easy to buy. They cut out the middleman, designed their own frames. They allow you to try these on at home. And that way you can pick out the perfect pair without even leaving your house. So by rethinking how eyewear is sold, they made high quality glasses more accessible. And for every pair purchased, they donate to someone in need because everyone deserves to see clearly. Everyone deserves to see clearly. Very nice, simple message. So taking what you are and who you are in the world and thinking about how you can get that down to one simple message. We do a exercise when we're working with clients around this concept of why do you live in the world? Like, what is it that you're doing? And we use some examples that really get it down to a very simplified, like what's the most simple thing you could say to someone that's going to make them understand what your business does and why it matters. So this is one that we're going to talk a little bit more in the next webinar. So using systems and technology to your advantage. As much as possible, you want to rely on machines to do the things that are repetitive. I talk about the rule of three. If you're going to do something more than 3 times, it's going to involve more than 3 people, or it has more than 3 steps. That's a process. And typically you can find systems that can take those processes over for you so that they're not as prone to mistake, that they're being done on a consistent basis. This is a great place to implement CRM management systems to manage your leads efficiently and build warm up, nurturing, win back, and top of mind campaigns. So CRM is not just about a customer relationship management product storing your customers. It's also about interacting with those customers over time. So if you're just using it as a big Rolodex, you really aren't using the power of it to simplify your world and make sure that your marketing is being as effective as possible. So we're going to talk more about this in Tech Meets Trust. We have our next webinar on May 13th, 2025, and we're going to unpack this simplification. So once I have messages and I'm ready to deliver them, how do I implement and know what those technologies need to look like? Where do they live within the prospect, suspect, and customer world? And what's appropriate within each one of them? The MarTech stack nowadays is tens of thousands of products that you can bring in and start to implement. And it's about choosing the right products and the right mix in order to address the problems your customers, your company is trying to address. So now we're going to talk a little bit about measurement. So measurement is tracking the right metrics that drive the refinement of your business strategy and maximize your ROI. So it is the right metrics. So what are you concerned about? What are you thinking about as a company when you're measuring? So some of the meaningful ones are cost per lead, lead to client conversion, customer lifetime value, website engagement metrics, bounce rates, and session duration. You'll notice I don't have the metric of how many people visited a certain page because often that doesn't matter. What we want to know is how much time did they spend? Certainly not your homepage. If somebody ends up on your homepage, that often means they're lost. They don't know where to go next. We want to deep dive them to the thing that they're trying to answer. So Michael, I think in your world, like what are the things from a palliative care perspective that you guys are measuring or thinking about?
So, I think about it from obviously coming from an administrative overall administrative standpoint. We're looking our some of our key measurements from a growth perspective is looking at our new consults. We're tracking how many new consults per month are we getting, and then we need to know per consult typically how many follow-up appointments we have per new consult. And in palliative care, we're caring for, and you talk about that, succinct messaging. We are in the business of alleviating suffering in patients with long-term serious illness. Period. So that's the simple and succinct message. Alleviating suffering in patients with long-term serious illness. And these patients, ideally, we capture them early in their disease, and we're seeing them maybe 2 years out of a potential life-ending event. But sometimes our patients get better, and they are cured of cancer or cured of whatever serious illness they have. But if they typically while we're trying to get them earlier, we're getting some referred later in their illness, and we may only have the opportunity to see them a couple of times. So we have to kind of measure about approximately how many new consults we need on a monthly basis based on those follow-up appointments to keep the volume going with our current capacity. So measuring that incoming volume and our current capacity and keeping that balanced so that we have strong productivity, that's our trick. And that's what we have to measure on a monthly basis.
Yeah, and so are you more concerned on that perspective of having enough people on the back end or that you're like overstaffed? Is that the
Yeah, both. So we're concerned with ensuring that our productivity is strong on a monthly basis, and then projecting if we need to hire additional capacity. And as we bring in anytime we bring in additional capacity, additional providers, we typically see a drop in our productivity. Because you have a ramp up period to bring those people up to bring them up, get them oriented and get their volume up. And typically when we bring on new people, it takes a little while to build that volume. Right. So you're actually building that additional capacity. So what we don't want to have as well, and we're in a unique situation, palliative care at Emory, because we only see Emory patients. We don't see patients externally, and so there is a lot of potential patients that we haven't even turned the spigot on for that volume because the dissatisfaction would be so high if we weren't able to see patients that are being referred. So as we have capacity with new providers, we then can go out and turn those individual spigots on with different providers and oncology and other specialties, and tap into those potential sources. But we have to measure that based on our current capacity. So it's back and forth between those metrics.
Now, one of my favorite analogies in that category is I'm a baker. And so you're not supposed to put all the eggs in at once when you're baking a cake. You put them in one at a time to make sure they get mixed. And so
Yeah.
if you try to do it the other way, it's just going to take forever. It's a mess, those kind of things. So on the meaningful KPIs, we're going to discuss these in much greater detail on the next webinar because this is where the tech comes into play. being able to sort of see things as they show up on the suspect, prospect, and customer side, understanding what those behaviors look like. And we'll talk about the metrics that we see a lot of companies tracking that we really call vanity metrics. They sound really good to the board, they sound good to the CEO, but they don't really mean anything on the day to day. Like what you need to know are what are those really meaningful points at which you need to capture somebody and make sure that you are aware as like an early warning system about what's going to happen to your company. The other one that we'll want to look at, and we'll talk about this also in that same webinar, is the use of data to optimize your campaigns. So once you get past conversion and you're in that optimize and measure, how do you know which one is more effective? And how do you fine tune and bring down your kind of cost per customer or cost per lead? In order to do that, you have to do some experimentation. So looking at your subject lines and the ad creative that you're using, doing attribution. So what channels are really your most effective channels? Should you be on certain channels or should you direct those dollars somewhere else? And these all rely very heavily. Measurement is so reliant on the tech. And when I say tech, tech could be as simple as a, you know, clipboard that somebody's filling out, but how are we getting that information across in a way that the rest of the organization knows what that needs to look like and how that needs to work? So that's measurement. And measurement, tune in next time. I'll have some data people and technology people who can answer questions about those marketing tech stacks that you're trying to implement that always sound so simple when they're first sold, but become more difficult when you're trying to implement them at the end of the day. So then looking at Align. So Align, great marketing is about attracting and ensuring alignment between marketing, sales, and customer success to drive growth. Often when we talk about marketing, it is indicated as it's one department or one group's job. Oh, you're the marketing department. You come up with the messaging, like you're responsible for that. Well, if sales isn't singing the same tune and your customer success department, the people delivering some of the work on the back end aren't aligned, then your customer, they're going to sense that. And it's going to be what may impact your reputation over time. So how do we make sure that alignment occurs in a way that's going to be very consistent across the organization? We want to think about unifying the organization. Marketing, sales, and customer service are all responsible for the customer experience. It's not just one group. I really love marketing because it used to be this like transactional department, like get people in the door, get them to pick up a discount, get them to ring the phone. Now marketing does have this important overarching responsibility across the organization. So much so that often when somebody in a company doesn't know what to do with something, they're like, oh, let's give that to marketing. It becomes like this catch-all for everything. And you want to make sure that you're ensuring that your message is consistent across the company. Larger organizations have the dollars and bandwidth to make a mistake. Small organizations don't. And so when you're a small organization, this is way more important that everybody's saying things in the same way, that they're being consistent and they're authentic to it. So this unification is not just about making sure the message goes to your external customers. It's also about how do you roll this out internally, make people feel it, love it, believe in it before you start to put the message out externally. And so often, 90% of the time, companies focus on the external messaging and then they try to get the internal team to catch up. So you really do want to look at what do you already have internally and how can you then take that and make sure that's being done in a good way. And thinking about the customer journey, what are those handoff points between marketing and sales? For example, when is it appropriate for marketing to pass a lead to sales? Like when does marketing stop and sales begin? We talk about the customer journey. It's about 21 touch points on the marketing side and another 7 or so to close that person. So there's 28 touch points on a complex sale or a complex decision. And even though we talk about 21 of them being marketing, marketing may be starting to represent sales at the end and then truly giving it to someone who's supposed to close the deal. So what does that look like? How does it feel? And you don't want sales to start getting leads that they don't understand what they are, where they're coming from. You know, you want that unified approach. You want a unified content strategy that supports all the touch points and feels and reinforces the brand so that you're not losing anything along that continuum. So Michael, in a palliative care space, like what are some of the challenges? I bet there's a lot of them. Challenges in aligning the organization from when someone sort of shows up at your doorstep as they go through that journey.
So, we are unique again, being primarily for our division and our department, providing palliative care to our internal team at across Emory Healthcare. Our providers are serving primarily as our marketers, and our sales, like, combined. And so their interaction with potential sources, referral sources, which would be other specialties, is really what drives that relationship. And whether we have develop a long-term referral source or have kind of a one and done. And we go through things with them in terms of consult etiquette, and how to respond, understanding what their needs are. Sometimes sometimes they're referring patients just because they're not sure what to do with them. And we may look at them and think, or our providers may look at them initially and think, this really might not be, a candidate that needs palliative care, unless they talk to that referral source and understand what their needs are and what they were thinking when they referred the patient. So the key thing is really ensuring that they understand what the referral source is trying to achieve with this referral, and managing that handoff, with one-on-one communication, not just doing written communication, but actually having a warm handoff on the patient, so they understand what they need, and then giving them feedback after we complete the consultation. So that communication is really key for us. And when we have strong leaders who are doing that, it really shows up, really shows in our volumes.
Yeah, the more personal something is, the more there's an expectation too from the patient, or for you, customer side of that, of they expect that. Like they want things to have moved along, and it's frustrating when you're re-explaining or people don't get it from the perspective. And it's even frustrating on the simplest of things. I'm doing a home renovation project, and I can't tell you the number of contractors I've talked to that I talked to an initial person and then I re-explain it to the next person, re-explain it to the next person along the way. And you're like, why didn't I even talk to the first two people? Like, what was the point of that? Right. So make
Exactly.
your customer has that distinct journey, because you really want them to give you a good referral and have a good feeling kind of going through that process, such that they've been listened to and you've
Mhm.
delighted. So yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about simplifying, measuring, and aligning. The next part of the SMART framework is that you make sure that you respond. The market is constantly evolving. Businesses that react quickly to industry changes, can stay ahead of their competition. And so thinking about, how do we respond? What do we do that's new when we see like a news story or there's a change in the marketing technology? People really, again, I talked about this, it's not a set it and forget it. They want marketing to be like accounting. So like every month you do a balance sheet and you do a profit and loss and you pay bills, and you really don't want accounting that changes. That's typically an indication of a problem. But marketing does change so often and so much, relying on outside consult to help you understand what's next and where you're headed, and making sure that your company is agile enough to respond when something happens. And so there's two categories that are important here. One is adapting to industry changes. So what are the regulatory changes that are happening and that you might need to adjust your marketing messaging as needed to take advantage of those trends? That happens a lot in the healthcare space, of new regulations about how data is stored or how things need to be submitted. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean from a marketing perspective? And how can you potentially lean into that as a differentiator? So like if you're ahead of the curve on something that's about to happen, that's a way to set your organization apart from the other choices. And you want to make sure that you can stay agile and test new channels and tactics regularly. So one of my favorite examples in this category is our friends at Blockbuster. So Blockbuster in 2008, the CEO is famously known for saying neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition. In fact, I think when I saw the documentary on them, they had an opportunity to buy Netflix at one point, and it was a really good deal, and they decided not to. And so Blockbuster also, before they switched one of their services, didn't run any testing and like lost half of their user base in one quarter. So this is a thing that you got to pay attention to. What do those trends look like? What do your customers want? How are you going to react to it? This statement was made when Netflix was still mailing DVDs and starting a streaming service, underscoring the dangers of underestimating industry shifts and failing to manage reputation and innovation proactively. So, what are those industry trends? How do you either lean into them or stand apart and have a really good value proposition about why you're standing apart? So, big, huge thing that can impact you. Marketing is the first organization that has to address that and start to talk about it and either understand how does that really lean into our unique value proposition, or how do we need to adjust in order to continue to be competitive? So, what is that sort of canary in the coal mine that you need to think about? And then there's the other side, which is the crisis and reputation management side. So many organizations that we talk with, like I talk about, you either want to ride a trend, but you often, if you're a smaller company, don't want to become one because that means something had happened inside your organization. You need to have a plan to address negative press and even simply social media. So if somebody gives you a bad review, if they say something bad about your organization, you do need to respond to it. Like, how are you going to respond? What are those words going to be? And use your real-time customer feedback to adjust your marketing efforts. So what are people asking for that maybe you're not addressing? If you ask your customers, they'll tell you. So they don't like the price, they don't like the way you're delivering something. That's an opportunity for marketing to determine how that needs to be woven into the overall brand story. Warren Buffett, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. If you think about that, you'll do things differently. And knowing that something's going to happen, you need to prepare for those potentialities sooner than when it happens, because when it happens, it's too late. You already want to have like messaging, a way to address it, because you're scrambling in the other case. And so this is one that, oh, this isn't going to happen to us. Hopefully it's not, but it's an insurance policy. Go ahead and build out, like, how are you going to deal with a reputation issue? How are you going to manage even the simplest of like a social media post? So, Michael, in the palliative care space, like, talk to me about responding. Like, what do you guys do, can't do, those kind of things?
Responding, going back a slide to the responding to industry changes. And I think we all remember just a couple of years ago, right, with COVID, and what kind of impact that had across many different industries. And if you remember, prior to COVID, the telemedicine really didn't exist, and so with when we went into the pandemic, an exemption was provided for billing for office visits, and that allowed us to implement telemedicine. So across Emory and certainly in palliative care, we launched totally new telemedicine service just incredibly rapidly. We went from, I mean, because patients weren't coming in for treatment, so we launched telemedicine and went from having no visits to having thousands of visits per month of telemedicine. It worked really well with palliative medicine because we don't have to do physical exams all the time for our patients. So that actually worked very well and continues to work to this day. We are seeing about 40% of our patients still on through telemedicine. So that was a rapid response to changing the industry that was required. That if we were going to continue to see the volumes and see the patients that needed to be seen. In terms of responding to the industry, I've certainly been in the position as former hospital CEO having to respond to to negative reviews, and unfortunately you can't go get them removed, right? So you get nasty reviews. The only way to really try to overcome those, certainly you want to try to do customer recovery in certain situations, but the other thing is just flooding it with positive reviews, right? So making sure that the people that are your best customers and the ones who are your fans are actually giving you reviews, and actually giving feedback, positive feedback, because the ones most likely to give reviews are the ones who are angry. So making it easy for people to provide those reviews. But and to avoid that, to avoid them actually getting angry enough to put something online, is making it easy for them to complain within your organization, so that you
Yeah.
can address it real time, so they don't go on social media.
I
And so
guess it's a double-edged sword, right? Like you want to know, but then if you ask too early, then maybe they go external with it when maybe
exactly.
internal you can address it, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
So we really try to make it easy for people to complain inside our
Yeah.
organization. Make sure that they give us that. So we want to know when they have a problem, so that we can address it. So they don't go on social media and post nasty reviews. So we want to address those real time and make sure patients are happy. And quite honestly, in palliative care, it is, you would think that it's a really touchy feely, sweet place to be. But when we're dealing with opioids, and opioid management, and having to then back patients off of those medications, it
Yeah.
sometimes can lead to unhappy people, and so managing that can be challenging. So that's where we also face some challenges.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The timing of when you ask. I have my daughter was traveling with Delta and she was on like a terrible flight that got delayed 1,000 times and she got the NPS score. How likely are you to recommend? And she's like, right now, not very likely, right? So
Right.
like you time it in a way that is going to be beneficial to you because if you ask too soon, could be a problem. If you ask too late, could be a problem. So how do you get that? But you do
Mhm.
want it because it can be it's dramatically helpful when we get into some of the technology conversations later on future webinars. It does impact your ranking and all kinds of things. So it's you want it, but when do you want to ask for it? To understand your customer journey, like when is the right time to ask for that kind of thing is really important. Okay. And so finally, target. So target personalization is no longer optional. Targeted marketing ensures businesses reach the right audiences with the right messages. So are you reaching the right message, right audience? Do you know even what the right message is? I see a lot of people confusing segmentation. So like, who is my customer with what really drives, or why does my customer want or work with me in the way that they do? And that's where you need to make sure that you really understand it. So thinking first about customer segmentation of who comes to the location that I'm at, those are income, where do they live, those types of things. But you then need to use that data to create detailed buyer personas. And the way that you know you have a buyer persona is the words that they're going to use when they're talking to you on the phone or they're interacting with you or choosing your service. And then you need to tailor campaigns to those different audience segments. And so personas, I have an example here of a persona project that was done, and it was based on social media and the use of social media and how it related to the purchase of chewing gum. So I did this study years ago, and believe it or not, there is a social media connection between what social media platform you prefer and what chewing gum you chew. And there were about 24 different personas. Some of those personas, if you look at the chart to the right, are primarily online personas. So we have our Clubby Chloe, Popular Peyton, and Sharing Shauna. They mostly spend their time online. And then you have Dedicated and Dan and Basic Bill. They're still carrying a flip phone, and they do not spend a lot of time online. The interesting ones are the ones in the middle because they are the ones who transition us from one persona group to the other. So if I have a product, I need to know who I'm going to introduce it into first, because that person will then make connections for me to the other personas, because they may not see my great online ad. They may not be participating in some of the other things that I'm trying to do. Inquiring Isabel is a very interesting persona. She likes to experience things firsthand. So if you want to do something, you have to do like an installation. So there was thing they were trying where they were installing these really cool art things that they wanted Inquiring Isabel to participate in, but they were trying to do it online. Inquiring Isabel wants to go and actually see it and take pictures of it. And when she does, then you can turn that into an online thing that Popular Peyton and Sharing Shauna and Clubby Chloe may see. And Clubby Chloe is intentionally Clubby Chloe. She's the person for a vice brand. So if I'm introducing a vice brand into the world, I want Clubby Chloe to know about it first. And then she's going to help me spread that across to everybody else. Interestingly, with Clubby Chloe, she typically has two social media profiles, one for her friends and one for her grandmother. And those are different and separate on purpose. So understanding purpose, what drives people and why, get you down to the types of messages you use. Clubby Chloe's looking for exclusive. Popular Peyton likes to use the words I. These are all very important to those marketing messages such that they make sure they hit the mark. And when activations and campaigns don't, it's typically because you're not using the right words to get to the persona group that you care about. So how do you think about that in a way that you're really going to target those personalized messages? This allows you to dynamically adjust your website messaging on visitor behavior, and it also is a driver for implementing AI-driven personalization in your emails. So every email shouldn't be the same email going out to the same person because they all don't think and talk and want things in the same way. Some of your personas are going to be more visual. Some are going to be more based on text. So like, what is that? What does that look like? And how do you know? And it sounds complex, but there's really only 3 to 5 differentiators within a category. So as long as you know those 3 to 5, you can really be much more targeted with the way that your messages are working and how personalized they are. And even think about where you may be going with those. Certain zip codes have more of a persona, and you won't waste as much of your marketing dollars if you're using the personalized approach. So that is the smart marketing framework. It is first to simplify, streamline with clear messaging and automation. We're going to talk in the next webinar more about how that automation can work. Measure, tracking those key metrics, and that is definitely a technology tie-in. Aligning, ensuring that your company departments are working together. Responding, adapting quickly to industry changes, and targeting using segmentation for personalized campaigns. So if you lean into those 5, you're going to move people along that backcom over to conversion in a much more effective way. These are things that either get in the way of getting people to conversion or missing in complex organizations in order for them to be successful. With that, Shafika, I think our next webinar is Tech Meets Trust. It's going to be on 3/15. Oh no, is that 3/15? I did that wrong. 5/13. Yes, 5/13. Pay no attention to the man behind the counter, the screen. That shows you. Let me find it here. 5/13, 2025.
You
So
got it.
yeah. So Shafika, I think you had some specific questions on palliative from Michael. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you guys both so much. We really appreciate your perspectives and your expertise today. We do have a little bit more time, so I actually wanted to follow up with a couple questions for both of you. And the first one is, if an organization is feeling stuck in their growth, what's one step they could take to start shifting in the right direction? And feel free to jump in whenever.
They've heard a lot from me, Michael. What would be your advice? And then I'll jump in. I always have something to say. Shavika will tell you that. So
Um, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so if an organization's feeling stuck in their growth, what is
Hmm.
one tip you can give them to start shifting at least one step in the right direction?
Yeah, I think, looking at what's currently being offered, and what potentially that is missing. So what are you currently offering in the marketplace, and what's missing? And getting out there and talking to your customers. And it doesn't, we rely a lot on you can get lost in the data, because we've got a lot of great data. We use Press Ganey. We've got lots, and I, being a data person, often rely on, I want to rely on something that gives me some big numbers. So I feel like it's more reliable. But sometimes it's really good to get out and just talk to a small group, 6 to 8 people that have a conversation with both patients and referral sources to get an idea of what are we currently providing and what maybe is missing. And that may give you an idea of an area to potentially expand to, because especially from your referral sources, um, they often are going to be give you a really good idea of where the demand is, and they may be referring to you for one particular area, but there might be an opportunity somewhere else once you talk to them.
That's funny. So you're a quantitative guy and I'm a qualitative guy. So my answer would be similar, but it's like that quantitative smoking gun. Like people look at the smoking gun quantitatively, then they think they can assume what the problem is. If you get behind hey, we've had this drop off, go and just talk to a few people. They'll tell you it's amazing. And you've talked to them one-on-one, you start to see the patterns across it, which is really interesting. So I like that. I also like the idea of bringing a small group of the representative leadership team just in a room and starting to understand assumptions they may be making. Like it's so often just that people haven't really talked to each other about it. It's like, hey, so this is what we're doing. You're doing that. I had no idea. Like that campaign's going on. The bigger the organization is, the more complex it is. People are filling in the gaps in a way that you need to potentially facilitate some additional direction, making sure like your mission, vision, and value statement is very solid and that people understand it and believe in it. Because that really is the ingredients that drive good marketing.
Absolutely.
And it's when you guys brought up talking to your customers, it reminded me of something I heard at an event I went to recently, and that's your customer's last great experience is their new expectation. So just going out there and talking to them can make all the difference for you. And then I have one more question for you guys. So looking ahead, what do you see is the biggest opportunity for businesses in 2025 when it comes to growth and sustainability? So I know you kind of touched on this a little, but if you wanted to expand on that.
You first, Michael. I'll come back.
Yeah. So from a growth and sustainability, I think quality and what you're providing. So we're really getting an idea from your key leadership, and like you talked about, Eric, looking at your mission and values and ensuring that everyone is aligned on the same page. We want to make sure that what we're all on the same page about what we're providing and what we're here to do. And that we've got a clear strategic plan outlined for the next year. And I think that certainly we look at our 5-year plan, but for the next year, we've got a lot of turbulence, and we don't know what's going to happen from a healthcare perspective. We've got new leadership, and from a government perspective, and healthcare, we know that impacts all of our managed care providers as well. And so, really drilling down on our core services and ensuring that we're providing high quality care and that we're doing it efficiently, so that we can weather any upcoming storms. We don't know what's going to happen from a reimbursement perspective, and what's going to happen, with volume down the road as that impacts. So I think that those are the key considerations we're looking at.
Yeah, and I think if I think about it from the marketing or technology perspective, my shtick this year is everything old is new again. And partially because so many of the ways to get to customers and get in front of them have been disrupted so violently, that the old school just pressing some flesh, like going out and meeting people, interacting, all those things that you used to have to do when you ran a business. There's a book called Fourth Turning, and it talks about the return to village. And so instead of going to a mass store and buying something, you would go to like the individual cobbler who makes your shoes or whatever. We're in this world because we buy things direct to consumer a lot. We are influenced by our communities and organizations in a way that's different, and we kind of thrive. Think about the pandemic, and that's why all these like city centers have started to grow
Mhm.
up a little more, is because people are looking for relationship and experience. And with things like AI, which get rid of things that we potentially had to do, those mundane tasks, it allows us more of that kind of freedom, which means as someone who's trying to get in front of people, I have to go where those people are. And so
Mhm.
may not be on their screens as much. They're actually out in the world. So I gotta go out in the world and I gotta like connect. And by the way, I don't want to buy from your company. I want to buy from you. So like, who are you? How do you represent yourself? So that's a hard one for a world where people have been used to kind of like someone does a search and they find us and now they're going to buy.
Mhm.
That's just one small part and maybe not even a part of the customer journey because they may be completely skipping that step. So how do you lean into that disruption? And those that kind of go back to some old school tactics are going to be the ones who win.
Mhm. Yeah, establishing relationships, I think is really important. We,
Yep.
we're looking at new opportunities through those established relationships. Really key. We've got, and I think it's really easy to grow complacent when you've been growing at a really rapid pace like we have, and we try to not stay complacent by continually looking at building new relationships and looking at new ways to deliver the product. And so we continue to look at and have looked at for years doing certain things that we've not implemented, but we're kind of ready to implement down the road, but we're looking for the right time to do it. And so some of those things we may be exploring the next year, like at Emory specifically, embedding our providers with other departments so that we can, maybe have a palliative provider with one of our oncologists in one of our oncologists' office, so patients can actually be at one spot for their appointment and see both palliative care and their oncologist. So it's doing things like that, using our inpatient providers to see outpatients in order to increase our capacity. So looking just in the future, continuing to explore new opportunities and new relationships. That's really key.
Yeah, I had a lady I worked with, and she used to say, "How can we surprise and delight someone today? Surprise and delight." So, what are you going to do to surprise and delight that potential customer, patient, buyer of your product or service?
As what the Ritz-Carlton would say, you have to anticipate the guest wishes.
Yes.
So you're
Yeah.
providing it before they even know.
Awesome. Well, you both have definitely surprised and delighted all of us today. So thank you again. And just as we wrap up, I want to let everyone know that we're going to be sending out the Smart Marketing Framework for Growth later this week. So keep an eye on that, as well as the recording of the webinar. And don't forget to mark your calendars for our next webinar, Tech Meets Trust, on May 13th.
All right.
And that's all for today. Thank you guys for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you,
been a
Michael.
pleasure.